Anyway, it's recording. So
Right.
all of that was on tape.
Memories.
Oh lord, if I ever actually get time enough to actually just do a straight blooper reel, it's gonna be so long.
Oh my god, that would be fun, but for our eyes only.
Yes. Okay, anyway. Welcome back to the Writing Inquisition. I'm Carol Benton.
I'm Marie Ellen.
I'm Emma Rosalie.
And she's back. We missed her. We missed it her last time. I mean, we still had fun, but, I mean, we were missing the piece of ourselves.
I missed you guys too.
But you did have important things to do.
I
so.
did. The engagement photos came out really nice too, by the way. I'll show you guys later.
Yay! Just in chorus. Anyway, so this episode we're going to be talking about plot. It's going to definitely be more bare bones and not nitty-gritty stuff, because there's a lot to cover with plot. So we're going to be talking more in a broad scope than, like, scene by scene.
Yeah.
So the first question I know is going to be, I think we've had a similar question before on a different episode, and I know this is the bane of my existence, but how did we come up with our plots?
I could go first.
Okay.
Okay.
If you're ready, go for it.
Ready.
I'm having war flashbacks.
I'm like, okay, how did I do this?
Well, for me, my original idea for the whole story didn't end up panning out for this draft, so it's kind of irrelevant. But I think plot should grow from the characters' wants and not being able to get it. I had another thought that just went out of my head. But basically, for me at least, I came up with a twist, and then I realized that twist could be the whole basis of the story, which helped. And then from there, I kind of roughly outlined, but not totally sticking to it. And now I try and just, like, stay within the context of the story and the scene, and if, as much as possible, kind of go, okay, logically, what would happen next? And once I get to the end, how can I end it in a surprising but, like, not out of nowhere kind of way, and can that propel me forward to then the next step? So that's kind of roughly what I do, just to not block myself in too much.
Okay. You want me to go?
Yeah, go for it.
So I started writing when I was 13 and homeschooled, so I was very isolated. I was definitely in my moody phase. And I really wanted to get the fuck out of my house. But of course I was 13, so I couldn't really do that. And I started writing a Runaway Princess story, which is still the core of at least the first book. And after the first draft, I realized how much my writing had changed and how many fucking plot holes there were. So I went and rewrote and filled in a bunch of the plot holes, kind of overpopulated my cast, which is saying something considering it's still really big.
Holy crap.
Mm-hmm. And eventually it got narrowed down to the point where it is now, and then of course Emrose got to look at it and help me straighten out the last little wrinkles and shit. And I think it was your idea to switch the last two scenes?
Or something, or at least probably I pointed out, like,
Like,
hey, you could do
it's
this.
Something like that.
Yeah.
You basically said something along the lines of, this is not a strong ending and the previous scene feels stronger, something along those lines. Mm-hmm. So that's how that flip happened, and it worked out so much better, and you're probably going to have to do that again. Because I have no idea how to end book 2. And book 3 is just going to fuck me up. And now it's your turn.
So, my plots came from, like, 2 different sources, I guess. One of them, it was just I had an idea that I had come up with, and it was like, okay, I wanted my story to be revolving around a girl who was from, like, this world, and then she somehow got herself into this other world. And then, like, as I was trying to write that, this was, like, when I first started writing, by the way, so as I was trying to write that, I had this dream about, like, these 7 sorceresses, and, like, they could use all these different kinds of elemental magics and stuff, and I was like, oh, that is so cool, and then I woke up and wrote it down. And then, a little while later, I was thinking, I can combine these two. And so I tried doing that, and then it somehow evolved into, like, just this, rather than her going into this other world, she was already a part of that world. She had just been kind of taken out of it a little bit, and then was reintroduced into it, and it kind of started becoming more about, like, it had fairy tale concepts and you know, hints in that and stuff like that. Parallels. And I had, like, way too many characters and way too many creatures.
You still kind of do.
And, yeah, well, it's been narrowed down a lot since then. A lot. To a much more
her cast used to be, like,
state.
50 for the first book alone.
Oh, it was
50
terrible.
major characters.
It was terrible.
It was almost as bad as the number of major characters that are going to be in the 54.
Well, this is why I started combining, like, certain fairy tales that I wanted to use into one character.
Yeah.
Because that was the only way it was going to narrow down anything.
Plus, then you also have a more complex
exactly. It's not
character
just, like,
and a way more complex
storyline, too. Yeah, because
illusion.
There's multiple fairy tales happening all at the same time. So
yeah.
It's like, oh, okay, this is how that all ties in. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how that all came together.
Yeah. And then, so now we move a little bit further away from our own work. What sort of templates have you guys seen for story arcs?
Well, there's the 3-act structure, which is the most common. I think there's a 6-act structure too. There's something else. There's the hero's journey, which everybody knows.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other one that everybody knows but may not know it by this name is called the Freytag Triangle. Everyone who's taken an English class in the United States has heard this fucking thing. Yep, it's the little, here's the beginning, and then here's the rising action, and here's the climax, and here's the resolution.
Right,
done.
Yeah, that one.
Except it's made up of, like, 60 of those in miniature throughout.
I always forget what each of those things are called. I don't know. I'm like,
well, not because instead of resolution, which makes more sense, démon.
Yeah.
Stupid French word. And the other one that I really love reading is called story braiding. So you have, like, X amount, like the obvious example is 3 for those of you who have dealt with braids before. Different plot lines that you have to weave together. And that makes it a much more complicated, much more interesting storyline to follow, at least as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Plot twists are also very important. I think we've talked about plot twists in every fucking episode we've ever done.
Yes, they're fun.
They're so much fun.
They're so much fun, and you really should have a few.
Let's do the twist.
A good one for if you want examples, I would turn to a certain video game that I was able to play earlier. Oh no, last year I think. Was it last year? I don't remember. Persona 5.
Oh,
it has like 3 different plot twists, and you're just like, what?
What are these?
Each one. So that one's a good reference for plot twists. They're amazing.
Yeah. Actually, the plot twist in Coco was really, really well done.
It was really good too.
I haven't seen it yet.
Okay, I won't say anything. Just go see it.
Let me just put it this way. The thing that they foreshadow, they intentionally mislead you, and it's amazingly well done. Like, I fucking loved it. I loved it so much I actually bought it for myself, because I saw it with Becca and Minjay at their apartment, like, 2 weeks ago. Yeah, so plot twists are very important. It's one of those things that readers tend to look for, which can also actually make the foreshadowing thing a little bit more difficult, because everybody's looking for it.
Yeah.
Especially in the rabbit fandoms.
Yes.
Because I have seen so many fan theories that actually turn out to be true. and I have no idea how they did it. Like, how did you know?
Lots of critical thinking and instinct.
Yeah, like, it's one of those things where you apparently learn the skills, but you're not good at them in school because you don't give a shit. But then you start watching something or reading something, and then all of those skills come into play.
Yep. Yep.
Chuck, damn it.
Plot twist. Speaking of which.
Yeah. I still can't believe that if they didn't get picked up for season 6, they were going to reveal that Cass was actually God.
Oh.
I'm so glad they got picked up for season 6.
Hell yeah. That would have been like...
That would have been
what?
so
No.
annoying. Anyway, so points of conflict are also very important. They're what drive the story along. You can tend to have major and minor points of conflict. The major ones being the overarching storyline that you're having to do, like, with Ronwyn, I want to say, being
Queen, yeah.
crazy psycho, taking over the world
Yeah.
thing.
Ooh, book 2 is gonna be fun. Yeah.
I hate you. I hate you. I hate you. I hate
Our
you.
grand
You have
plans.
to give me the rest of book 1
I know.
first.
I just want to not write book 1 and just write book 2.
I feel ya on that one.
You need to get writing.
I know!
But there are also multiple, like, flavors of conflict, if you will, not just sizes. Why do I want ice cream now? What the fuck?
That's what I was thinking of. Welcome to the Point of Conflict ice cream shop.
Oh my god, that would be amazing! Can we do a sketch like that? Oh my god!
Doesn't have to be ice cream. I just like ice cream.
Oh my god! Okay.
Yes, we can. We can put that in our crossover. You can call it
Yes!
be a store.
Ah.
or
Okay.
a town or something in Wonderland. Oh my god!
Yes!
Yes!
Oh, I can see how we can make that work. Okay. So back to the point I was trying to make. The two, like, umbrella categories are internal and external. So for internal, I have listed emotional conflict, difficult decisions, and secrets. Go for it. I've been talking a lot. Go for it.
There's interpersonal, which is the characters' relationships to other people. I totally forgot the rest of them. I think you already said the other one. So yeah,
Okay.
interpersonal. That one. I also... Is this conflicts? Yeah, kind of. So I also think if a character has, like, a wound or a trauma or... There's another word that I'm forgetting.
Phobia, fear.
Yeah, fear. Just something holding them back. It's cool in a story if they all kind of weave together and the wound is holding the character back, but they also want something. So,
Plus, that's
That's
a
fun.
really good point of triumph for the character if/when they overcome it.
yeah.
And then, are there any other internal ones that you want to talk about?
So mad. I feel like I have more. But it's gone.
No, I think you guys already said them.
Okay. Then for external, I have listed romantic, combatant, so, like, having to fight with somebody, like you sort of said. And then I don't think I worded this well when I wrote it down. Because I literally have written contrariness between others, which... like, what I mean by that is, like, if 2 of the 3 of us are arguing and the third person is watching it happen and can't do anything about it, that sort of a thing. Like, they're having to deal with
Other people.
the helplessness
Yeah.
of not being able to, like, resolve a conflict between other people.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm sure there are more out there that people are going like, well, what about this one? But I don't brain anymore.
Those are some really good examples.
Yes. And then I just did not. I swear to God, I planned
And it's all gone
to go
gone
back.
shit.
And, well, that too. I planned to actually, like, go back and write down notes for the questions that you had given us, and I just forgot.
What are the questions I even said?
What do we do when we're stuck?
Okay, well, bring you back to the graph book I've been reading because it's helped a little bit. What I do is I try to go back and reread a few scenes or a few pages or as long as I need to, and I try to look at it like still as a writer, but also ask myself, if I was reading this, what would I expect? What promise have I made to the reader that I can then bring in to this scene? And then especially once I get to the scene where I'm stuck, you know, which happened to me before, I was like, okay, well, logically, or what's the most obvious solution? Well, she could go and do this. And then if you think, well, what would the character do? So kind of like broaden it and then narrow it down to exactly what would the character do in this situation. And then if you're kind of like, well, she could do this or that, try it and then go back, because I did this like 3 times, until you find the right path. Or if you're near the ending of a scene and you're stuck, you can think, well, what's a surprising way I can twist it? And what I like, especially if I like to read things like this, is if the character's solution to the problem then makes the problem worse or brings up another problem.
Yeah, that's always fun.
That's really, really fun to do. So
I fucked up!
Yeah.
I tried to fix it and I fucked it up more!
So that's what I do. Or cry and eat chocolate.
That helps too.
Yeah.
Come back to it later.
Taking a break
After
is
you've gotten
definitely
some
good.
happiness in you.
Yeah. What about you?
When I'm stuck. I'm always stuck. Well, when I'm stuck, I tend to go back and look at my outlines and see what I'm missing. Because somewhere along the way, I find things like plot holes and like things that now no longer make sense to me than when it did when I initially wrote them down. Or thought of them, you know, and try to fix those. So, like, when I'm trying to work out something else, it usually somehow stems over to the part where I'm stuck. And then it's like, oh, well, since now this has been resolved, I can resolve that.
Yeah.
And usually that's what ends up happening. So it might be something that you're just missing, or maybe something that you hadn't really thought of yet, but you just kind of put a placeholder there. You're like, I'll think of it later.
Yeah.
or just something you hadn't really thought through, and you're like, okay, now I'm going to think about this a little bit more and see if it actually makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Or if it's plausible.
So thinking about setting could be good too, if you're like, well, how can I bring the setting into this to
Yeah.
create more of a problem? Because for me, I get stuck when I haven't created enough obstacles or thought about it. I'm just like, well, she needs to go get the jewel, and then I'm like, well, that's boring.
Well, what's in the way of the
What's
jewel?
in the way of getting the jewel?
Yeah.
Or does she get the jewel, but it turns out that's not what she actually needs to get? So,
Yeah. And then one thing that I know we have, all 3 of us, taken advantage of is once we stop filming for a day, we tend to hang out for a while afterwards and or beforehand.
Yeah.
And if any of the 3 of us are having issues with our plot, we can talk to the others and bounce ideas off of them, which solves so many problems when somebody else's brain is working on it.
Yeah.
or even just talking out loud to yourself and recording it.
Yeah.
Because for me, I just need to, like, say it, and then I'm like, oh, well, I just said that, so she needs to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. And then...
Sometimes. Depending on how stuck you are.
Oh, I thought I had an answer for that. Fuck. No, I don't have one. I feel like I had an answer to that question at one point, so I don't have it. But that's sort of along the same lines as what we do when we get stuck anyway. Because those same sorts of strategies can also help for when you're just trying to come up with a plot. I know there are tools out there to help figure it out. You can definitely turn to, like, Dungeons and Dragons campaign manuals and stuff like that to get ideas, stuff like that. Tension... I think that one's gonna have to end up being its own episode, because there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
Things to avoid in your plot.
I know.
Is it one of the things we talked about with the other episodes that we filmed?
No,
Really?
I don't think so.
Oh.
Maybe it is.
Proceed.
I didn't think it. Okay, so
We
what
don't
I
know yet until you say
yeah,
it.
what I try and do is if I'm stuck or if I just want to make sure everything's fine, I look at the sequence of events and if I can connect them by not saying and then, but if I can do therefore or I think but is it, which is a common thing that floats around the internet. So then your plot doesn't seem like and then this happened and then this happened. And
like
then,
a 5-year-old's telling you.
yeah,
Right.
and then I think too a good thing to keep in mind is stories aren't about just multiple things going wrong. It's about everything getting worse. So if you can worsen things versus being like, well, these are 5 other obstacles I'm just gonna throw at my character, that's gonna be really boring because like, your reader's gonna be like, okay, she's just doing like 8 different other obstacles versus being like, oh, my dog died, but the dog is also the key to unlocking this, so I have to go do it. You know, I don't know. That wasn't a good example. I didn't think of anything to follow.
You could have built a story from that.
Yeah.
I saw potential.
Yeah. The thing that was making me think of that was you were talking about in which episode was it that we were talking about that? Where you have the 2 fight scenes back to back, and like not. You're trying to figure out a way so that you can either like separate them or make them feel less repetitive. Like that's what I thought you were talking about.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm just stuck with that, so I'm just
But
stuck.
that does still bring up a good point. If you don't want too much tension right in a row, you need to
you
need to have a break in
then
order
it's
to
not
actually appreciate
tension
it.
anymore. It's just
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to add to things to avoid?
Let's see here.
dancing.
You were having way too much fun with that goddamn pillow.
To avoid. Oh gosh, my brain is no longer working.
Avoid your brain no longer working.
That too.
At this point, no.
Okay. Another thing that Emma has brought up in our what questions we should be asking thing that apparently none of us actually prepared for was continuity errors for a series. So, expound upon them.
Yes, please. Okay, so because I worship V.E. Schwab,
Yes.
and she wrote writing advice things, I'm sure I've read this before, and just her saying it made it click more in my brain, but is, for example, magic. If you can, like, broad stroke, like, everything in the first book without going into detail, that will give you room to go into detail later.
Right.
Because you can be like, well, I never said that nobody can have purple hair. This guy does. And he can control dolls.
What that reminds me of? Those nesting dolls.
Yes.
Yeah.
You unpack the big one first, so it leaves a lot of wiggle room.
Exactly.
And then you get closer and closer and closer to the point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then if you're in book 2, you can not paint yourself in a corner.
Yeah. I thought I had a thing. What was it?
Also, thinking about future books in the series would help.
Yeah.
Because then you can be like, oh, well.
Yeah.
Or if you know that you're going to be not, how do I phrase this? If you're going to be inconsistent, make sure there's a good fucking reason for it. Because Lord knows book 2 is very inconsistent from the book 1 for Wrinkle by Blood. But there's a device in there!
There's a reason.
Yes, because history has been rewritten. Ha fun!
Yeah.
But therefore that also leaves room, but you really have to make sure that there's a reason for it, and it has to be justified.
Yeah.
But other than that...
And I guess, just mapping out, like, going, before you even really start writing, or even after you start writing, like, the first part of it, you may want to, like, just map out everything a little bit, like, what's happening in this first one, what's happening in the second one, where, like, things, so that way you can visualize it, like, okay, so this book is pretty vague, but it still has stuff there that's interesting, and then this one gets a little bit, like, more in depth. You get further and further down the rabbit hole, basically.
Yeah.
And, so, I mean, just map it out so you can visually see, and, like, what is the most important thing? That would probably be in your last book.
Yeah.
And hopefully, because for me,
And
sometimes,
what are the surface things?
Yeah. If you discover things while you write, which is where you run into issues when you're in book 2. And you're
It's like, damn it!
crap, I just did that. So yeah, if you do that, and I think mapping it out is good, because then you can be like, I forgot that I wanted plum trees to talk,
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Put it in.
Careful with the table, you're gonna shake the camera.
It just feels nice. Thank you.
And then another thing with your plot that is going to make everything so much easier, especially with the continuity thing, have a beta reader, because they're going to be able to spot things that you just can't anymore because you're too close to the project.
Yeah. Like my whole book.
Or like that one time I forgot to change a name.
Yeah.
Who the hell is this?
Random character. You turned Deja back into like an elf, and I was like,
Oh, no, it wasn't Deja. It was the
somebody
Suli
else.
character,
That's
who's
right.
Roshni.
that's right. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I don't think she means that.
Oh, sorry. Getting a call from my mother.
Sorry! You're busy. We should probably try to remember to like silence our phones before we start recording.
Probably.
I just forget because I don't get calls from anybody except robo numbers. But yeah, having a beta reader who you can trust to tell you when something is off without completely shredding apart your soul, that can make all the difference in the world. And beyond that, go forth and let the plot bunnies populate.
Yes.
I can't really think of anything else to really bring up on this, and I thought we would be able to just go on for hours on this one.
I think, because we...
or Kefruft.
Yes.
Well, then I guess that's it for this episode of The Writing Inquisition. I'm Carol Benton,
I'm Marie Allen.
I'm Rosalie.
and we'll see you next time.